Damn, every time that comes on, it gets me. What's up, everybody? Paul from For Real here with Phillip Lietz, correct? Am I saying that right? Did I say that right?
Yeah, you
Lietz?
got it. Yep, that's
Ah,
right.
yes.
Yep.
From Arids Only.
Yep.
And if you do not know who he is, get on Instagram, follow him. The absolute coolest Uromastyx, not to be mistaken with the European Uromastyx, as somebody politely pointed out on the internet, because, hey, guess what? My spelling is fucking terrible. So what is going on tonight, man? Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
It's great to have you here. So why don't you
Thank
go
you.
ahead and give a little background and
Sure. Yeah, so I'm let's see, I'm 34. I'm 34 years old. I've been working with reptiles pretty much just like everyone in our industry, like fascinated by dinosaurs when I was a child, and then it snowballed and grew and developed, and then eventually kind of wound up doing the Uromastyx thing. I had some really fortunate luck with a little early on with Uromastyx thomasi, and was able to. That was the first species I bred, and so that kind of just. I was already hooked on all of them already, but you know, when that happened and they bred and the eggs hatched, like it was just like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. I've been doing this forever. I love these things. And it just kind of took off. And I've always kind of dabbled, like definitely Uromastyx are my primary passion. They're the thing I'm most successful with, and the thing I spend most of my time thinking about. I do, but I've always dabbled in lots of, little other side projects all the time. I think we all kind of do that, you get just to keep things a little spicy, So, I've been messing around with some Xenogama Taylori for a little while now, and getting a little bit of good breeding out of those things. And I've got some Ackie monitors now and a handful of anoles, and I've got some. I used to do a lot of Australian knobtail geckos and a lot of bearded dragons back in the day. And I did leopard geckos for a long time. I've kind of been around doing all of the trendy stuff and the stuff that everybody wanted to do. And then kind of, I don't know what it is about Uromastyx in particular. I can't say why specifically they drew me in, but it's just, I just love them, man. They're just awesome. And so that's kind of what got me to where I am now.
Yeah, they are unbelievable animals that are very, very underrated.
Oh yeah. Very, yeah.
And I've seen your pictures, and obviously they're amazing. And when you see a photograph of something, it's definitely not the same as seeing it in person. No matter how good the picture is, it is never the same. So I've seen some of these blue, yellow, crazy looking Uromastyx in person, and they're mind boggling. And it's amazing that more people don't go crazy over them. So I assume, because I don't pay a ton of attention, but I don't see very many people working with them.
Sure. Yeah.
What do you think the reason for that is?
Okay, yeah, that's a great way to start, honestly, because Uromastyx, you're right. There aren't a ton of people working with them. I would say over the last 2 years, more individual people crop up breeding, a handful, a species or two here and there, and a few other people who are trying to take it a little more seriously, which is really, really nice. But there's a pretty long list of reasons they're not commonly kept. One of them being really, really sporadic importation from, what are otherwise known as conflict zones and conflict countries and relatively war-torn areas that are either have trade restrictions, that we have trade restrictions with those countries, safe to go to those countries, such as like Somalia and Yemen and, fail states and things like that. That's one huge reason. So sporadic importation. And then you have the notable distinction with these guys of being pretty high stress and they're pretty erroneously compared to bearded dragons with a lot of regularity. And so that leads to inefficiencies in care. And so then when the care isn't good, you don't get a lot of breeding, and you don't get a lot of people dedicating a lot of time to breeding. And then you couple that with the fact that when stuff goes wrong with these guys, you missed your one shot the whole year to get anything done. They lay one clutch a year. I mean, there are some, a couple of species will double clutch from time to time, but it's probably not very good for them. And usually you get pretty low. You can get low success rate in one of those two clutches. And then you get the occasional individual that will lay the odd second clutch here and there, but it's definitely not the norm. And so if you miss the shot once, you've got to wait until next year to try again. They're similar to tortoises in a lot of ways, which is to say that they take a long time to reach sexual maturity. They have a relatively low reproductive rate comparatively. You know, they just respond really hard. Like, they're similar to a lot of reptiles in the sense that they are, quote, bulletproof. In what I mean by that is they can survive in very poor conditions for a long time. And you just, you know, they're never going to breed and they're never going to do well in those circumstances. So it's just hard to get, it's very difficult for people to kind of get all of their consistent, regular success with Uromastyx. Again, I think that's changing, but I agree with you completely. They're, you know, it's like, these things are like panther chameleons that live on the ground. You know what I mean? They're beautiful and they're so interesting and enigmatic, and they're intelligent like a lot of iguanas. You know, they're really good at learning routine. They're really, really good visual learners. They understand a lot. They're very food motivated, so they can, you can train them in certain ways to come to you with specific foods. And there's just so much that you can do with these guys. There's a lot of, and they live a long time, you know? So it's like, you take all these different factors, you put them together, and they have a high desirability with a low availability. You know, so I think those are some challenges for people, you know?
Yeah. So in other words, they're very similar to like a blue tongue skink, where you have that real short window that if you miss it, you're waiting, you know, a whole nother year. And I think when we look at society, and we'll say society as a whole, everybody wants it now. Nobody wants to wait. Everybody wants multiples. And more and more and more. But at the end of the day, patience with an animal like this seems like it would be just a great project to work with.
Yeah, it's key, man. I mean, you said it very well there, the instant gratification generation, right? I am technically a millennial, I guess, as I understand it. And I definitely feel that in some ways. I spent a lot of time, you know, maybe 10 years ago, like really repeating instant gratification in certain ways, which is one of the reasons it took me a while. I mean, I've been keeping Uromastyx for probably, I don't know, 10 years or something, like approximately 10 years before I ever bred them. You know what I mean? So it was like, and there were so many reasons it never happened. Right. And they really will not give you instant gratification in any regard. And even if, like, I have seen the occasional person get a pair, like a really solid pair of Euros, and they didn't have to raise them. They didn't have to troubleshoot with them. They didn't have to do anything. They did the right person at the right time with the right circumstances, and they get one clutch. They might get one good clutch of babies. And then the following year, because they weren't the ones who raised them up, or they didn't understand all the nuances of how to really get them to breed consistently, it falls apart at that point. So you may get one or two good hits, or you might be able to find, conversely, if we're not talking about captive breeding, you might buy like 4 or 5 solid imports, you know what I mean? And you just happen to be lucky enough to grab one that was real solid when it showed up, and it right to you right away, and you had good enough care that it took off. But until you get into like the dozens of animals over, more than a few years, and the dozens of pairs and the dozens of clutches over multiple years and multiple generations, there's so much information and so much experiential data that you're never going to have your hands on, because the time wasn't put in, and you don't have it's experience based, right? It's patience based. And so people very regularly will ask me questions such as, oh, do you have any tips for Ornata? Or, people post in the Uromastyx groups, and I understand why they do this, so I'm not trying to shit on them or anything, but they'll post, oh, I'm getting a new J-Ride today. Any tips? It's like, dude, there's the only sufficient advice anyone can give you is to be patient and do your research. Those two things are the only tips available, and they're going to pay dividends long term. And a lot of people take offense to those things. They're like, well, you didn't give me the bullet points of exactly what I need. And it's like, it is all out there. You have all of human knowledge on your phone, and you can't take the time to find it. You know what? It's nuts.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing these days that, okay, so again, and we're not shitting on anybody, because people ask questions, and sometimes, more experienced people get upset. Like, why don't you just Google it? Well, sometimes you Google it and it maybe confuses that person.
Sure.
Sometimes you have to ask those questions, but here's the thing. It obviously sounds like it's about being very patient and learning what the animals can do. Now, it's awesome that people, you know,
Totally.
I know I'm going to get crucified for this. It's great that we bring in imports and get fresh bloodlines. We get fresh bloodlines going.
Yep.
But
yep.
Don't rush.
Yeah.
Don't be in a hurry. Don't overfeed. Don't underfeed.
Yes.
Don't over calculate. You know what? I'm my own worst enemy.
Yeah.
I do that all the time. I overthink everything.
Oh, sure.
And then I pay for it. And,
for sure.
And,
yeah, man. Yeah.
You know, so when you're raising these guys, do you think it's better to like, okay, so we have a Moroccan Uromastyx, and I don't know what the species is. So my son got it 1.5 years ago from a good friend of ours from Extreme Exotics.
Nice.
He's super cool. We don't know if it's he or she. I have no idea how to tell. We have him on sand. He's got 2 caves, one at a hot end, one at a cool end, stuff to climb on, eats his veggies. You know, he's really cool, but he's still very skittish. You know, he still kind of hides most of the time. He's gotten better where if I come in the room, he doesn't dip right away. But when you're starting off keeping these, what is your recommendation for keeping?
Yeah. So, okay. Well, so first of all, yours is a Uromastyx nigroventris. That's the Latin on those guys.
Okay.
And as far as sexing, it's going to take you a long time. They are unless it's an adult, they're really difficult. Yeah, even then, even adults, it's like I have had full-grown, sexually mature adult Uromastyx nigroventris that are difficult. This is the other
that's
Bengal.
awesome.
I was going to say, hey, buddy. Yeah, he's cool. He's a nice guy. But anyway, so in terms of broad suggestions that I give to new folks, one is always err on the side of larger cages than you're going to be recommended, right? Because people are always going to give you like, oh, put it in a 40 breeder, put it in a 20 gallon or something like that. It's not going to be good enough, right? Always larger the better. The second thing is be responsive to the animal, right? So a simple example would be if you see it basking for extended periods of time, it's probably not hot enough, right? Or if it fails to come out in the morning for hours and hours and hours, it doesn't show up until noon or 1. It's probably not hot enough. You probably have to kick those temps up a little bit, right? I tell people, don't be afraid to invest more at the start so you don't have to invest more over the long term, right? So the more time and money that you invest initially in the very first setup, the more time you spend building it out and doing it right from the start, the less you're going to have to pay in the future, because you get people who will get the bare minimum at first. And that costs money, right? The bare minimum is going to cost you a few, $300-$400, right?
For sure.
Even then, it's probably not ideal. And so then you're going to have to spend more money to make the upgrades. Whereas if you just made the whole thing from the start, just do it right from the ground up, right? You got to build your house on a good foundation, right? You have to do this. So, and that also doesn't just mean in terms of monetary investment. This means a time investment too. Spend the time scouring Google, find every single care sheet and PDF you can and read it through, right? Mm-hmm. Like we all will read. How many people read the Harry Potter books for shits and grins, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's 7 books that presumably took you months to get through all of them, right? Mm-hmm. Well, okay, you're getting a living animal. Pretend you're reading the Harry Potter books of this animal. Like, find out its story, find out where it's coming from. Take the time to. If you do those things, you will succeed just fine. I have a lot of customers who come to me with a lot of questions, and the ones who take the time to build out a proper cage, and they have no hesitation asking me good specific questions. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I have no problem giving them the answers. If they get an animal for me, I will happily give you, you're paying for the animal and for my time as a consultant. You know what I mean? So I'm happy to help you, provided you will do what you need to help yourself in the situation.
Yeah.
But the ones who put in that time, they're the ones who, after a year of like figuring out the quirks of the animal and fixing minor caging issues and just little tweaks, being able, you put in all that effort up front and then you put in those little tweaks over that year. After that year, they've got some of the most beautiful examples of these animals I've ever seen. Better than mine, better than half of mine. People from 2-3 years ago send me pictures of their nigroventris or their ornate or whatever. It's finally hitting sexual maturity and it's getting its adult colors. And man, I mean, I get envious. I'm like, what are you feeding that thing? Tell me, like, what did you did better than I did, It's great. So those are the broad strokes that I try to give people so I'm a martial artist as well as a reptile keeper. I've talked about this all the time. I've been doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and judo and wrestling for like 14 years or some crap.
Okay.
And we talk about foundations, right? And like the basics, the fundamentals will never let you down. But I like to teach people concepts more than specific bits of information, So like the concept of being responsive to your captive, right? Being responsive to what they need, and troubleshooting, being willing to troubleshoot on the fly and figure out what they need specifically. Reminding people to be patient and invest a lot of time and don't make split decisions. Like get multiple sources and multiple examples of multiple breeders to ask different questions to. Those things are going to pay off more than like, oh, make sure the basking is 125 degrees. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like, that's too simple, because you tell somebody put a basking light and make sure that the basking zone hits 125 degrees. They're going to get one of those little Zoom Ed mini halogens that's like 75 watts, and they're going to blast it down on a point about that big on a basking rock. And that little point's going to hit 135, and the rest of the animal is going to be like 85 to 95. And it's just not, it's not the same thing. They're going to be like, oh, it says 135. It's right there. I got my temp gun. It's like, well, that's an example of like a nugget of information rather than like a foundation, something, a real concept that you can give someone that's going to answer that question more fully. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So in terms of keeping in temperature, I hate to say this, but I'm using the ceramic heater from Zilla. So, but he's still small. Yeah. So when he sits underneath there I've got like a log and a rock and everything kind of just piled up. And I see him out there once in a while, but he doesn't seem to come out a ton. So do you think maybe that's just not the reason is it's just not warm enough?
Yeah, it's probably a combination of factors. It could be warmth and heat, but it also is there's a lot of their activity and metabolic function that's tied to brightness and visible spectrum, right? So the brighter you can have that cage, the better it's going to be, right? Especially, in terms of midday, right? Like, even on a cloudy day, we go outside, it's brighter than the inside of our cages. You know what I mean? On a cloudy day. And that plays a huge role for these guys, right? And so the ceramic heater is not bad. It's not like the wrong thing, but it's just, I would say it's one piece of the puzzle. So you're going to want, if you're going to have a ceramic heater to add supplemental heat, which is fine, you're going to want to make sure you have a sufficient number of lights that are adding brightness to the experience too. Otherwise, that's some mishaps in behavior. Yeah.
So that makes more sense to me, and maybe that's what's wrong. So see, you learn something new every day, everybody. This is great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it may not. It also may not be that anything's wrong. It could just be. You said he's skittish, right? That's totally normal for Moroccans. Moroccans are real. They can be, at least for the first few years, they can be real flighty, real touch and go, and it's not until they hit a large size and like sexual maturity where they're like, okay, maybe this guy.
I see what you're saying.
I don't have to sweat him too much because he's never really hurt me.
So now, do you keep any? So I don't want to shift gears. I want to stay on this because these guys.
No, please do. No, go for it. Yeah.
No. We're going to stay here because Jeremy and Jeannie Bod are friends of mine, and I want to get as much information about these guys as I can, because I'll be honest with you, we're looking for. Kind of moved away from the whole theory of I have to have everything to breed. Right?
Yeah, sure.
So to see some of the colors on these guys, it's just nice to be able to walk into a room and say, wow, that's a cool looking, not, oh, here, let me slide this drawer open. Here's a ball python. Here's a boa. Here's a whatever. Slide the door shut. You really don't see it.
Sure.
So what is your suggestion as far as levels of keeping? What are the best starter Uromastyx? Like, listen, I'm not going to lie. I love the Egyptian, the big ones.
Oh yeah,
I love those things. They're me too. Cool. They don't even have to be. I think for me, it's their head and their eyes. They've just got that real cool look. Like they don't have the
red eyes for sure.
They don't have the greatest like bright fluorescent colors, but the size, they just look super cool. So what is your opinion?
They're tanks, man.
Yeah. What is your opinion as far as starting off with Uromastyx? Where would you point somebody?
Sure. So I think depending on the time of year and depending on, like hatched last here at the incubator, I might give you a slightly different answer from time to time, because I can be really moved by like what's coming out and what's hatching, right? So I'll give you three. I'll give you like my top three, and I'll kind of give a little bit of a breakdown as to why I like those three.
Okay.
And I think one or two of them might be a little bit counterintuitive. So the first one I'm going to suggest, the thing that I think is the very best one to start with, is the ornate. And I'm a little bit biased because they're some of my favorite animals, and they're far and away the most popular. But one of the reasons I suggest people start with ornates is because they're colorful enough and interesting enough to really motivate people to go all in from the start. You know, okay. You're not going to get a good ornate if you put it in shit housing. So if you get a good ornate and you take the time and you invest the time, you're going to get a killer animal, right? They don't get that big. So we're talking, 14, 16 inches tops. You might get the occasional oddball that gets a little bigger, but they're going to stay smaller than a bearded dragon. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be extremely colorful. Even captive bred females, when cared for well and put under great lighting, will get quite colorful. So when we think of these female ornate Euros being drab, a lot to do with them being captive or versus wild caught, because a lot of captive females develop a lot more color than their wild counterparts for various reasons. And so you're going to get great color out of both of them. And they're just they're inquisitive enough and they're curious enough, especially as babies, to where they learn quickly and they can make great pets in a shorter amount of time. Okay. But the other two that I'm going to suggest, so one is going to be Uromastyx princeps. And the reason this one's going to be a little bit counterintuitive is because they're very rare, and they're but that's only because so far, there's only myself and a fellow named Damon Gee out in California. We're the only two people so far who have hatched them in the United States. That should be changing soon. I know of a guy in New York who's got a clutch incubating right now, and I hope they hatch for him, because it'd be great to add more people to that list. They're just very uncommon. So they're expensive, but they are badass, man. Both males and females can be colorful, although it takes them a long time to start getting color. We're talking 5-6 years before you start getting real distinguishable blues and greens on them. And it never gets anywhere near as bright as the ornates, but it's still beautiful, and they get yellow, and it's just, they're charming, really beautiful color. The second reason is they don't get big. They're small, right? They max out at like 10 inches long. They're just not very big animals. Yeah. Some of that's because of the shortened tail. So their body's still relatively stout, but they have that shorter tail, and the tail is the other reason. They have that explosion of spikes as the tail.
Is that the one that kind of looks almost like a spade?
No, that's Thomasai. So the one you're thinking of is just like the flat disc-tailed one. That's Thomasai. Okay. And those are badass too, but the princeps, they're about the same size as the Thomasai, and they have like a gnarly. Their tail looks more like a Egernia, right? Okay. Where it's big, like those Espalosis, I think, or the ones with the real super spiky bodies, right? So that's what their tail looks like. So they're really interesting. Okay. But the other reason they're great is princeps are super active. They're super intelligent. And in my experience, other people would disagree with me here, but I think they're relatively simple and hardy. So the babies may be very tiny and a little bit sensitive when they're brand new hatchlings, but in terms of long-term, like sturdy animal, princeps are quite forgiving in some regards. Okay. And then the third one, which is also going to be a little bit counterintuitive, but I'm going to suggest Uromastyx yemenensis. And the reason these are also a little counterintuitive is because as wild-caught animals, yemenensis are very sensitive, very, very, very sensitive animals. But as captive bred, they're just like ornates. They're so charming, curious and inquisitive. Some of the adult male yemenensis that I've seen have been some of the most like interactive with their keepers of any species, even though I think they're all pretty interactive. And yemenensis has a unique coloration. So they're like a Denver Broncos blue and orange with white banding, and they're gorgeous. They're really pretty. And the other reason I want to push those is because they come from a fail state, right? Yemen doesn't have a functioning government, and the ones that are here. We're very likely not to get any more. I think there's been 2 importations of those things in the last 20 years. The number of representatives that exist in United States herpetoculture is quite small. So the more people we get working with them, the better. And only myself, a friend of mine named Matt in New York, and then a gentleman named Scott Wilson in California, we're the only people who have gotten viable babies out of that species over the last 4 or 5 years that I know of in the U.S. Yeah. A couple of people have gotten eggs, and there's a great breeder in Canada who's doing a great job with them, but they're super uncommon, but they're beautiful. They're really interesting and fun. and they're really worth the time. Captive bred babies are pretty hardy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So those tend to be my top 3 anyway.
So I know right now everybody's going to hate me because we're pausing here a little bit, and you know what? I don't care.
Yeah, who cares? Yeah.
We're going to keep going.
Yeah, let's do it.
And I'll fix this, I promise. Jesus, everybody relax. But so we look at herpetoculture as a whole, and people working with stuff, and you're working with animals, and you've named a couple other people, and it seems like a very small, I'll say, pool. In your opinion, are there enough people out there that are keeping the animals that, like you said, failed state, we can't get imports? Do people understand what's happening with some of these animals? Because I feel like we take advantage of importation.
Sure.
And nobody really thinks about what happens when the door closes until it closes, and then everybody's like panic mode. So we're at that critical point now with some of these that do people understand that? Do the people that have them understand? And I'm going to say it this way, your responsibility to captive herpetoculture, if you have these animals, you should be seriously focusing on working with them to get them out for people. This is how we keep our hobby going.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, sure. So I think there's a lot to be said about that topic. The first is that there's no guarantee that any of these things will be around for any length of time, especially with animals like Uromastyx and a handful of other genre out there that are, either have been imported once or hardly ever, and so few people stick with them. But I think the other things to bring up about this particular topic is that, technically our industry is still extremely young, right? I'm only 34, so I look up to guys who've been doing it since before I was born, you know what I mean? But even with those guys in mind, we're still talking about less than 100 years or so, approximately 100 years of like legitimate, concerted, serious keeping in captivity outside of zoos, right? And we don't have the luxury of, millennia of like keeping and breeding dogs and cats, for example, domestication of horses, pigs, cows, sheep, goats, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have necessarily the luxury of the popularity and global span of something like the global fish trade or like arowana that have been around for so long. But what we do have is a template, right? What we have, if any of us who wants to keep reptiles and amphibians in captivity, definitely, of course it's not for everyone, but people should consider keeping and breeding them, right? I mean, our trade is coming online, literally online, if you will, at a time when we have more people who, we have so much exposure through the internet that we can show these animals, we can educate people, we can spread the word, we can get people interested in what's going on with these things. And I think that the future of, I've been talking with a couple of friends about this. I would love to be able to like fast forward 500 years or even 100 years and just see what herpetoculture is like in 100 years or 500 years, right? Because I think we're seeing a huge trend now towards people doing exactly what you're talking about, which is trying to become like a bit of a Noah's Ark for a specific species in a given country, right? I'm friends with people who keep Uromastyx in other parts of the world, and some of them, they're the only one doing it in the whole country. You know what I mean? Wow. That's a really cool thing. We've got so many people even here in the US who are taking that responsibility upon themselves to say, all right, Australian water dragons used to be common, and now they're, really uncommon, really difficult to get your hands on, right? There's this really interesting Instagram account that I follow. I'm completely blanking on the guy's name, but I think it's Indicator Species, and he breeds those like really badass purple little purple psychedelic frogs. It's amazing. I don't know anything about those frogs, and I get to watch this guy kick ass with them. It's so cool. We've got other people like like Frank Payne, who's like breeding some really his chameleons and his Lygodactylus, and it's like if it wasn't for him, and now I see him and a couple other people have been breeding those Peter's banded skinks and stuff. If it's not for people like that who take an interest in something that doesn't have a really well-defined market
obscure,
market-based. They're obscure, like it only takes one doing it really well, showing it with really good photography, documenting it, making it look nice to get someone else inspired to do the same thing. Like that's how I got inspired with Uromastyx. One of the first people I saw doing it was he's a good friend of mine now, but his name's Camille Hammers over in the Netherlands. He's Hammerhead Reptiles.
Okay.
He was one of the first guys I saw, breeding Uromastyx, and he was documenting everything he did, and it was so fun to watch him put baby pictures and then breeding pictures and then laying pictures and then hatching pictures, and he documented the whole thing. And I was like, this guy is doing some cool shit, and I want to do that too. That's really, really interesting. And it's been nothing but a treat now for me to be able to have. I hate social media for so many different reasons, but it's given me the privilege to see other people doing really cool things and allowed me to pick and choose from other industries, like look at aviculture, right? That's birds. I think it's aviculture. That's how it's pronounced, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Aviculture, avian stuff. People breeding, keeping and messing with insects, people keeping and messing with fish and koi and all kinds of random stuff where I'm like, dude, this is just such a cool thing,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I went off on a slight tangent, but
No, that's okay. And that's, I've heard this a million times. So I'll tell you, Eddie Soto was on the show, keeps the Australian water dragons. I remember probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, they were everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Right.
Now, nowhere. And these are, obviously the hobby.
They're very uncommon. They're so difficult to get your hands on. Yeah.
The hobby, the industry, everything goes in cycles, and things get popular and then they get unpopular, and then it goes back and forth. Yeah. But when you have guys like Eddie and Ron St. Pierre, and I've followed Ron since I got into reptiles years and years and years ago. I bought blue tegus from him.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of going to visit with him.
Oh, nice.
So it's amazing to hear the stories and see the animals. And probably one of the biggest things that I take away from a lot of people like yourself, you have a focus and a willingness to put the time into something that obviously it's not a bearded dragon. It doesn't lay eggs every 2 months or every month or whatever. Leopard gecko every couple of weeks. Crested gecko, same thing.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you said jump ahead 100 years.
Yeah, sure.
You want to see what it's like. And this is something, when I first started doing this, I was going to ask everybody, fast forward 5 years in your mind right now, without thinking about it, where do you think we're at?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, you mean like as an industry?
Yeah, as an industry. And I've asked 5 years. In 5 years. I've asked other people this, and they're like, man, I don't really know. But based on what you see now, and when I see what you see, I mean the reptile community as a whole, from everything on the venomous side to, everything.
Sure.
Many animals are coming under fire right now. And I think it's something that as keepers and people that are out there, we need to discuss these things and talk about what the future holds for us. Because even a Uromastyx, a bearded dragon here in Florida, they said that if the animal could live in the wild, they may ban those animals here.
Yeah, for sure.
So what do you see 5 years down the road?
Oh man, I that one I couldn't say.
Put me on the spot.
Yeah, that one's a tough one because so for example, here in Colorado, there are some restrictions here, right? So there are some animals that are not allowed to be kept here, like such natives, right? So collared lizards and western hognose snakes, you can't really sell those things. Understandably so, I get it. I wish we could work with native stuff, because collards are some of my favorite reptiles. I worked with them for a long time. They're wonderful. But I think in 5 years things are probably going to be about the same. I think it's probably more in like the 20 years, where like in 20 years time, things will start getting real different. And I think it's going to be in both directions, right? So it may be that we see a greater restriction of what we can and can't work with and what comes in across the border and things like that. But I do think that what we end up with, what we are able to keep and keep going, and some of that will have to do with regulations. Some of that will have to do with whether enough people step up and like really take the responsibility to keep some stuff around. I think it'll probably depend more on that than anything. But regardless, once that, and maybe like, the stuff that we get to keep and that we will have in 20 years, I think we'll probably just have a better understanding of all of it, like the way because when I say I want to flash forward, that has to do with like the infrastructure around keeping reptiles and working with reptiles in captivity. That's what I want to see. Cause I want to be able to like, I'm thinking in like 50 years, I would love to be able to go to like a Repco, you know what I mean? Like a Petco version for reptiles, where you go and it's a store and the whole thing, it's like a massive countrywide chain. I mean, I don't necessarily want that. I want like independent reptile shops too. You know what I'm saying? But I guess what I'm getting at is I want to see like really well-defined steps to take for any captive reptile or amphibian, right? Like huge upgrades in the way we care for them, huge upgrades in lighting and supplementation and dietary regimens and like veterinary care and that kind of thing. That's because I think all of that is what's going to bring, it's what's going to bolster like legitimacy and dignity and set good examples for the future of the industry, because look, we all know the reptile industry's crazy sordid past, right? Like I've read, we've all read The Lizard King and Smuggled and Stolen World, and they're awesome. Like it's great to know our history. And I talk no shit against anybody. I would have done crazy shit too if I was alive, if I was working with reptiles in the 70s and 80s, I would have done wild shit too. But like, the past for our industry, maybe people aren't super into that. We get shows like Tiger King, which make us all look like crack addicts. You know what I'm saying? It's like, dude, and look, it was an awesome show, and I watched
just wait, just wait, because there's another one coming out called The Cobra King.
Oh, thank God. No, are you kidding?
No, I'm definitely not joking.
But that sucks. All right. Now I'm a little bit bummed out, but regardless, like I think in 5 years, if I had to really like say something about 5 years, I think in 5 years, we're going to have more people who are setting a better example for not just the public eye for our industry, but also on like an individual next generational basis. Right. So, like I think that Herpeton conference that Philippe de Vaugelet has been putting together, like once that, other than COVID being a shit show, that kind of thing, I was watching his talk at Herpeton 1, and he was talking about getting, like representation and things like this. I think, man, I'm just so happy there are guys like that, like paving the way and like trailblazing, and hopefully in like 30 or 40 years, I can be one of those guys too, that I've been around long enough and I have enough clout or whatever that I can start making moves like that and making big changes on a bigger scale. But like even just on an individual level, right? Like I have people, good friends of mine, especially from my jiu-jitsu academy, people will come and they find out what I do and they're like, dude, can we bring the kids by? I'm like, absolutely. Like the kids come over and I'll show them, I'll give them a whole tour of the whole facility. And I normally don't let anybody come over, right? Because I don't want people coming in and jacking my stuff or whatever. Or I don't need people knocking on my door and be like, you got any euros or whatever. I don't want that. But like kids and people who are going to be the, especially with friends of mine, people whose kids I know are going to be the next generation. Like
it's the non-reptile people. That's the best way to put it.
That's right. Yeah.
Listen, there's so many bad stories out there. We're originally from New York. Dick Gergen is like one of the godfathers of snake breeding.
Yeah.
And years and years and years ago, Dick was beaten, tied up, and everything stolen. So very, 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 very bad stuff. So we all know that those things are prevalent. I mean, it happens.
Yeah, it happens.
So, but exactly what you just said is people that aren't really into reptiles, those are the people that we want to showcase things to.
Right.
Those are the people that, you said you're at jiu-jitsu. Somebody, you got that? Oh, I want to come over and see it. And we go through the same thing here when, like my kids' friends come over and they want to see everything. And, then the next thing you know, you hear, so-and-so's buying a ball python. And regardless of what it is, when you say
sure,
like a reptile PetSmart type thing, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
If you go to Jacksonville and you go to Extreme Exotics, I would say that to me is I'll say poster child for the ultimate reptile store.
Gotcha.
And Steven Brazil and Sabrina Clark are fantastic. I listen to their employees. Nice. And we go to hang out, and you listen to them when somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I want this chameleon." Well, why do you want it?
Yeah.
Well, I want to hold it. I want to do this. Yeah. And they're like, no, stop. Now
you need something else, my man.
Listen, these employees, they could very easily say, "Give me your money. Here you go. I'll take it. There's a $500 chameleon. Have a nice day. They'll be back in 2 weeks. It'll be dead. I'll sell you something else." I've heard them take that $500, $600, $700 sale and chop it down to $100 for an anole and a nice setup, and tell them, "Hey, this animal will calm down. You can hold it." And it's like, that to me is what we need. It's teaching people the actual husbandry, setting their cages up. I've watched Steve take stuff off the shelves, set the cage all up for people. Then they're more excited about it at that point. And these stores don't make a lot of money. So no, they don't. All of you guys, listen, I'm a prime example of buying things off of Amazon and stuff like that.
But sure, yeah, we all do it.
You try to buy as much as you can and do what you can to support your local stores, but support the good ones. Yeah. You know, I'm not going to name any places. I don't want to get into that, but we all know that there's places out there that we just shouldn't buy animals from. And unfortunately, they catch those new people because everybody wants to save $1. So
right.
When it comes to the Uromastyx, what are the price ranges? Like, do they really vary heavily?
Yeah, they do. They vary a lot. Okay. So, you're going to find a pretty wide ranging variety. So you can find cheap, Saharan Uromastyx imps for $125 in some cases. And then you can go all the way up to like a, I've sold some slightly 6-month-old ornates, which are sexable and are showing indications of where the color is going for like $1,200. You know what I mean? So it's all over the place, but I think like a rough middle of the road is you're looking between 3 and 5 on average, somewhere in that range. And then your setup is probably going to be somewhere in the range from, like a bare minimum of like $300 something, like ballpark, all the way up to, it go as crazy as you want, right? A couple grand just to build like a badass saltwater, like huge, beautiful setup, like a saltwater type aquarium, but for a reptile, obviously. And the thing is though, these things live for a long, long, long time, right? So again, I mentioned before that they're very similar to tortoises. They really are. A guy I know used to say that there's like shellless tortoises. These things will live. Like an ornate should have a lifespan of 30 plus years at least. And the oldest Uromastyx on record was a Moroccan Uromastyx, and it was at a zoo in, I think, Germany or the Netherlands. I think it was Germany. But it was a zoo, and the thing died at like 52, 53, and it was imported as an adult, so these things can live a long time. Yeah, long time. And given the proper care, they can live a long ass time. Yeah. And so that's the other thing I remind people is like, okay, you've got an animal that's going to live. It could outlive you very easily, right? And you want to skimp on the first year of care, dude. Just spend all the money now, because then you don't have to you almost have to buy almost nothing for the rest of its life. You just got to give it fucking flowers.
Exactly.
It's like they're so forgiving if you do it right from the start. But yeah. So that's the general price range that you're looking at.
So what are the? I'm going to ask you this because it's pretty much just for me.
Okay.
Everybody's gonna hear it. Damn it.
Yeah, sure.
What do the Egyptians go for?
So they'll range. I've seen them anywhere from like 300 to 600.
That's not bad.
No, it's not too bad. And my captive bred babies, I list them for 600. I insist on 600.
You should go 700
because there was a time when they were $125 animals when they were being. Yeah, no, I know. I know a lot of. Well, that's something we could get on. There's a pricing thing in a minute I could talk about for a second, but I want to say that I think that we're talking about an animal that's large and that probably will live longer than a Moroccan if you give them enough time, right? They'll probably live 70 years, right? I mean, we don't know, but I would wager they're going to live for a long time. Probably similar to like a cyclura or something like that. But at any point, I think 600 is a good starting point because it's it's gonna weed out a lot of the people who just who could spontaneously drop $300 on something that's gonna get gigantic.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? So I think 600 is a good price point. I've seen wild caught imports for anywhere from 3 to 5 over the last few years. And then I've seen people spike up those prices a lot higher than mine, which, hey, you're free to do it if, it's worth whatever somebody's going to pay for it. But I think there's been a lot of weird price shit going on in the Uromastyx community over the last like 3 to 5 years. I mean, I saw somebody listing and selling Egyptians for $1,500, like larger juvenile, like some ones that were near adult size, listed them for $1,500, $2,000. I saw someone trying to sell an ornate for $1,000 and other stuff. It's like people have been getting really wild with the pricing, and I think it's because they see a market for animals that are in demand and rare. And I understand that. I've been on a few other shows where I have debated friendly with some folks about like supply and demand stuff. But I just think there's a certain point where if you keep pushing the price up too much, you're going to alienate your future.
Mm-hmm. Well, so this is,
you're going to alienate your customer base. And I think that, but go ahead.
No, so to that pricing effect, I'm going to give you the scenario, but I'm not going to say what type of animals they are because
sure.
People would be like, oh, so
Okay.
Somebody lists an animal for X amount of dollars because they don't want to sell it.
Oh, sure.
The thought process is like, if you had 5 holdbacks and somebody called you and said, do you want to sell them? And you said, yeah, normally I sell these for $500. Oh shit. I have $1,000. And they're like, I'll take all of them. And you're like, fuck.
Yeah, sure.
So
right. I get that.
I've seen this very recently where now all of a sudden a market where these animals come in from, say, Europe at $300 a piece are now selling for $700 to $1,000 because one person said, I'm going to sell for this much money. Now, here's the deal. This isn't a regulated market.
Yep.
We set our own prices, and here's my feeling on it. If you produce the best Uromastyx out there, you name your price, people are either going to pay or they're not.
Sure.
My personal opinion is,
no doubt.
If you're producing great animals, then you're setting that price. I do agree with the fact that with some of these animals, they may not be coming in heavily now, but what if you set that price too high and then all of a sudden you get a big influx of imports?
That's right.
Now you're stuck.
Yeah. Because if you're selling an Egyptian for $1,000 and then a big group of imports comes in and somebody can buy them for $300, you're never going to sell one, right?
Yep.
Now, and again, I don't mean this in an absolute way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there are definitely times when I have charged a lot more for certain animals.
Sure.
But that's like, we're talking about like a true U.S. captive bred that's sexable, that is, and whether it's an Egyptian or an ornate, it's showing a lot of potential in terms of its look. It might be a lot larger. There's a lot more time and a lot more effort that went into that animal. So like I'm not talking about those situations, right? No. And I also feel like it's weird in the other direction too. Like, I just recently, last year I started keeping some of the giant anoles because I was watching Ron St. Pierre, and I was like, I'll get some of those.
They're cool. Whew.
Some smallwood eye from him, and I got some Cubans, and eventually eventually those Potier, that would be the thing to get, and I'll get those at some point. But the point is, some of those Cuban anoles, like you go to shops here around town, they're $25. And I think that's like I don't know. I don't like that either, because it's like, dude, that thing is going to be like a pretty substantial lizard that, $25 does not reflect the amount of time and care you're going to have to put into that thing, right? You're going to have to invest a lot of money they get big. You want a pretty decent sized setup, and they're clearly super smart and really sensitive, so it shouldn't be possible for some 14-year-old to go in there and buy one. It's just like with dogs and cats. You got to be 18 or something to buy a dog or a cat. You got to be willing to take it to the vet. There's like at least a bar. You can't, a 14-year-old can't just go buy a horse, you know what I mean, and put it in their apartment, and I mean, obviously it's a horse. It's a big animal.
Listen, how about we go this route? How about a Gaboon Viper?
Yeah, right, for
How
sure.
about
Yeah.
$100 for a snake that's the fastest striking, close to
Right.
the longest fangs? How about Bothrops atrox?
Yeah, yeah.
$125 for a snake that,
Yeah.
these are serious animals that, again,
Well,
like you just said, somebody can just go throw down $100 and take it home.
yeah.
Sight
Or a
unseen.
Nile monitor.
Yeah, a
You know what
Nile
I mean? Like
monitor.
that's a giant fucking animal. And that thing,
And
dude,
they never.
there was a shop here in Colorado. They don't exist anymore. They went out of business, thank God. But they used to let this giant black throat monitor walk around the shop. His head was this big, dude. It was a giant. It was a full grown adult black throat monitor. And I watched that thing. I swear to God, I watched a little kid walk up to that thing and pet it and walk away. And I was like, that kid could have been dead. That kid could have been fucking dead. You know, like that is so bad. I mean, obviously there's a lot of shit that goes into that particular topic. I'm not trying to open up that. I'm not trying to talk shit against anybody, but I am saying that like an animal like a Nile monitor or a black throat monitor.
Yep.
You can't just be you can buy a 20-gallon and $100 and get that animal. Come on. You got to have just a little bit more, you know, I want it to, and there's like a tough balance, right? We want anybody to be able to get into the field of herpetoculture because we want it to be open and inclusive to everyone, right? Like everyone deserves, if they want to work with reptiles, you should be able to get one, right?
Yep.
But at the same time, you should have to at least meet a bare minimum of care before you get that animal. We have the same thing with dogs, with the same thing with kids. If you have a kid and you're taking bad care of your kid, the state's going to come take it away because you're a dumbass, right?
Yes,
but like
exactly.
There's like a nice balance here, but yeah.
In this industry, hobby, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
We go to shows and we see, you know, you have a great time at a show. I hear people that say, "Oh man, we went to this reptile show. Have you ever heard of this?" It's, yes.
What's a reptile show?
Yeah, we saw this and I'm gonna buy that, and I bought this, and you're like, okay, well, you know, what are you keeping it in? Well, the guy told me I could keep it in a 10-gallon aquarium for almost its whole life. These are the things that we have to get past. And again, Uromastyx, legitimately, I think you're the only one that I see besides Jeannie and Jeremy that post pictures of them. And you know, we got this one. We were at Extreme, and Steve has this really bad habit of saying, "So what do you guys want to take home today?"
Sure.
How about giant toys? How about this? How about that? And this guy needs a new home. So, and I love him to death. But we got this
right.
Because my son really liked it, and Steve said, "Hey, you know, it's starting to show. It's got some really nice blue on its back." He's like, "It's gonna take. You got a ways to go, you know." But it's a cool animal, and I wish there was just more out there about it. You know.
I'm with you, man. I mean, no, don't get me wrong. I tend to have I post a lot. I put up a lot of pictures, but you know, I have a couple of friends who are starting to who have been working with Euros for a long time, who are doing a good job as well. And I don't think anybody has quite the numbers that I do just yet, but eventually, hopefully, I don't need to be the only guy doing it. There needs to be other people breeding these things and doing it their way, you know? So, I'm happy to see that there are people doing that. I've got friends who are doing an excellent job. And, then there's guys who have fewer animals than me who are doing way better than I am. Right. So, you know, it's, like, my friend Matt out in New York, that dude almost never posts, but that dude he's got the killer cages and, I mean, big, giant, beautiful cages, great success with breeding. And granted, he only has a couple. He's only got a couple of species, 2-3 species, and only, you know, hatches, you know, half a dozen clutches a year. He's kicking ass. And I think he's doing everything better than I am. But it's like, I just have the luxury at the moment of numbers and just experience. And I mean, I'll always have that to a certain degree, right? Like, I'm just going to be in it because I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. But I agree with you. Uromastyx are enigmatic and not very well understood just yet. And I mean, even look at something like Bearded Dragons, right? You've got Josh and Tracy over at Phantom Dragon, and you got Heather down at Fairy Tale in Florida. These are guys who have been doing it for so long, and who everybody talks about Bearded Dragons as easy, right? They're just so easy. And I get that they breed easy, but those two different breeders are doing really, really, really great stuff with all their animals. And it's not just about making a killer morph. They're like thinking long-term about the longevity of those things in captivity. They're breeding things very responsibly, and showing that there's so many different ways to do it, and showing that they're tougher than we think they are, showing that they're more complicated than we think they are. And like Uromastyx, dude, they're not even established here. You know, I've been breeding the hell out of them for a while now. And they're still like, if I quit doing it, and if a couple other people quit doing it, we just might not have them at all. And I can't wait to be 50 years down the line and have such more data. I mean, you know, one of my things sometimes I get a little bit of shit in some of the Uromastyx groups, because I can be a little harsh with some of I mean, I think I have a good reputation in the sense that I put out a lot of educational stuff, and I want people to learn more, and I want everyone to succeed. Mm-hmm. But I can be really, really harsh with criticisms in terms of the way, you know, people will make broad generalizations about a species, or they'll say, well, you know, in my experience, Saharan's this. It's like, no. You haven't had 500 Saharans for 5 generations across 10 years. And until you don't have a sufficient data point for me. That it's not adequate, right? You know, there's like a bare minimum for scientific study, right? There's like bare minimum numbers to have like a legitimate,
you can't have 5 animals. Copy. Yeah, you can't have 5 animals and say, I know this. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, even breeding them, right? Like, so the 2 species I've bred the most of have been Ornata and Thomasii. And that's just, I've had them for the longest. Those are the first ones that I bred. There you go. So I'm much more comfortable making statements about what my Ornata and my Thomasii are like, as compared to something like Egyptians, right? Like I've only bred Egyptians twice. This is my 2nd year doing it. I got nothing for you, man. Like I can tell you I can tell you a lot about them, but I need 10 more years of breeding those things every year. And minimum. I need F2, F3, F4 before I can say like, no, Egyptians are this for sure, you know? And I mean, I can be a little bit dickish about it sometimes, you know, because sometimes I take it way too seriously. People are just trying to help someone new or like give some good advice, and I'll get in there and I'll be like, no, it's not like that. And that's not fair of me to do all the time, but like, you know, I think it's really important, and especially with Uromastyx, these things are really complicated, man. There's a lot of subtlety in their care. And again, we're talking about a genus that has 16 to 22 representative species. There's no way their care is going to be identical. There's just no way. There's just no way. You know.
So I'm gonna defend you a little bit, and I'm gonna be on the opposite side of that too. Sometimes we as keepers will see something on a forum, and we want to jump right in and kind of slap the other guy in the head for making a broad stroke comment. Yeah. And maybe this is the bad about social media. That person could have been just, well, hey, I'm going to post this real quick just so I can get my first thought out. And then when I get home or when I get a second, I'm going to go in and give more of a background on it. And
sure.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
So when somebody like yourself, who has all the experience, and I don't want to say all the experience, but has a 10-year plus track record,
more than a lot,
can come on and say, hey, you know, no, you can't generalize that. You have to go this route. Now, on the other side of that, the new person that asked the question is probably thinking, oh shit.
Yeah, I know.
I'm super embarrassed because I just asked this question. This guy tried to help, and this other guy just kicked him right in the ass.
I know, dude. I know. And I tried. You're right. I mean,
it's tough, man.
I try really, really hard to be diplomatic in all the things that I do. It's really tough. I'm
an asshole.
Look, some of it's just me, you know, like No, I really can be, but I try very hard not to be. But you know, I mean it when I say, like, you know, I have a shop. Like, I've got a whole shop now. I have a warehouse space where I keep all my stuff, and I'm there all day, every day, you know, or at least most of the day anyway. And a good 60% of my day is just helping people, people who have questions, or, you know, someone who's someone overseas who's trying to breed their Euros, or someone in Indonesia who's trying to breed their Euros, and I'm having to use Google Translate to help them out. And so some of it is that, you know, there's only so much I can handle mentally and experientially, right? Like, we all have the end of our rope, you know. It's not my fault. It's not like a character flaw necessarily. No. It's just part of walking through the world. Sometimes you get upset, right? But
no, and here's the thing is you can't. I don't ever want it to sound that way, because I completely agree. Sometimes, you know, my venomous mentor will be like, "Damn, like, I got these 5 snakes for sale, and I keep getting these messages for more pictures and more pictures and more pictures and more pictures and more pictures." And he's like,
"Oh yeah."
He's like, "Why? Google it. Sure. That's what it looks like." When you say, "Hey,"
I know, dude.
When you say, "Hey, I'm sending you money right now. I want to see a picture of the 5 you have to pick one." That's different. And I've always told him that what you should do is, when somebody blows you up about getting pictures, you should tell them, "Here's my PayPal. Send me $20.
Yeah.
It'll be put towards the sale price. You just paid me $20 for it."
Yeah, sure.
People will start saying, "Oh, this dude's charging for pictures." Well, then the tire kickers will leave you alone. And sometimes that's sometimes that's the most annoying thing about the reptile community.
No. But no, that's true. But, you know, so actually, I think there's a couple things to talk about here, which I find a little bit interesting. So the first thing I'll say is that I think there's like a totally reasonable and legitimate rationale behind saying, if you want to talk to me more, you need to pay me. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't mean like on everything, right?
Yeah.
Like, again, as I said before, when someone pays me for a reptile, they're paying for the reptile, the shipping, and for my consulting, because I'm going to help them, right? I have no problem helping anybody. I love getting updates from people. And, like, you know, just this morning, somebody sent me an update of a nigriventris that they got from me like 2 years ago. Oh man, it's awesome. I love it. Their little daughter loved the thing so much, and it's holding the Euro, and it looked awesome. It was just great, right? But I think there is something to that, because, you know, it's taken me, just in my own experience anyway, it's taken me a long time to get the experience that I have and to know the things that I know about Uromastyx. So it's totally understandable to pay for that to a certain degree. So it's like, you know, I already now, like, I have a care guide that I have on my website, and I'm working on a breeding guide right now. A good buddy of mine and I are talking about writing a book, you know, et cetera, but
awesome.
Yeah, it would be really good. But, you know, but the point is, regardless of which of those avenues I go down, there's like good reason to say, like, if what I put in those care guides is not answered for you, then I'm going to charge you to talk to me about, you know what I mean? Like, to a degree. I probably won't do this for a long time because it's just not in my character yet. But, you know, I put years and years of work into that care guide. And I can't tell you how many people who sometimes bought an animal from me come to me with a question. I'm like, did you read my care guide? You know, and it's not meant to be, you know, like,
you're not being a dick. You're just saying, hey.
It's not meant to put them down. It's just meant to say, like, I discussed this in the care guide. Yes, I'm not. Yeah. You know.
Listen, do you know Toothless Reptiles, Corey Amar?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so Corey has published all this fantastic monitor information, parthenogenesis, and everything's on his website. And he said the same thing during our interview. He's like, it blows my mind that I've posted all this stuff everywhere and people just don't go read it.
Totally.
And another thing, when you talk about lighting and this and that, when you look at the aquarium world, people spend thousands of dollars on lighting in aquariums, and they ain't getting money on the fish.
Yes.
In most cases. I know there are some expensive fish. So all you fish people that are noses up in the air, I will smack the shit out of you. Just shut up. You know what the comparison is now I buy a $10,000 ball python and I want to stick it in a $7 box.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah,
it's like
it's pretty funny.
It's the ass backwards, you know. And listen, I've been guilty of that. I'm a total I'm a total DIY guy. So if I turn this camera over here, those cages are all Tough Totes. Those are Home Depot Tough Totes.
I saw that. Yeah.
So I spent
awesome. That's great.
On these 55-gallon totes. They're less than $60 a cage. So
yeah, sure.
But I understand that there comes a point in time, hence all the glass cages behind me, that if you're going to keep specific animals, sometimes you have to say, okay, like you said, put the money ahead in the front so that 6 months down the road when your animal's sick and you're paying for a vet bill, you're not going, oh shit, I should have just bought that $60 light instead of buying the $30 light. So
you're right. You're right. I know you asked me, I feel like I got off on another tangent. You had asked me a question and then I said, there's a couple of things to talk about here. And then I just went off on like getting paid for your time, but I can't remember the question you asked me. Do you remember? Okay, well then that's fine. But let me just say, I mean, there's certainly something to that, you know. If you look at so I had to move when I moved into my facility. I didn't have the money to buy all the massive caging that I wanted. So I made cages out of kiddie pools. I took 2 kiddie pools and I cut the bottom out of one, flipped it over, and then riveted them together at the rim. So I now have something that's a 6-foot diameter pond that's like 24 inches tall, basically. It's a little flimsy and it's blue and it has fish on it, but you know, this was something that was sufficient for the Uromastyx in terms of ventilation. It's basically identical to the caging I had before. It was just made out of melamine, and you know, but it was something that you know, like, and I needed to save money there. So it's not like you said with the Tough Tubs. The Tough Tubs weren't expensive, but there are ways, you know, the cage doesn't have to cost $1,000. For you to have something really, really spectacular, really nice, and really, really worthwhile for the animal, you know? So, you know, and especially with Uromastyx, and I think it's probably true of all reptiles that we could keep all of them in much larger cages, just all the time. They could always be in bigger cages, you know, and don't get me wrong. I've got some like Uromastyx thomasi, for one reason or another, tend to do just a little bit better in slightly smaller cages. You know, it's just, I don't know if it's a temperature gradient thing or if it's a comfort thing, or, you know, but when I put them in really huge cages, even with really great temperature gradients, they use like a tiny portion of it, you know, they just don't really utilize all of it all the time. So I have a tendency to keep them in slightly smaller cages than something like a Princeps, which I keep in huge cages because they're active all day long, you know?
Okay.
So
now, what do you primarily build your cages out of? Is that what you're using as the round? Are you doing the round pools that are riveted together, or do you do a combination of wood and?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of everything at the moment. I was using the kiddie pools for a while, and I still have them. I have a lot of animals that are doing great in them, that bred in them. So I was like, all right, you're probably fine in there.
Yeah.
But I've been switching back to melamine on some, just because you know, melamine's white and it bounces the light around more, so you get a lot more better. You get a better visual spectrum, right? The pools work very well. I also use a couple of stock tank brands if I am. I sometimes use tubs of different varieties for like babies and stuff like that. But basically everything I do is all open top. Even my Ackies and my Xenogama, I keep them all in open top cages. Everything gets the same ventilation. The only thing that's not are the anoles, but that's because they can climb, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so I have a variety. I used to use the enclosed, like sliding glass front cages, but I'm pretty convinced that those things don't have enough ventilation for Uromastyx.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
It's kind of muggy. You get respiratory infection. There's some difficulty keeping a good temperature gradient in a fully enclosed space without good ventilation. And so I quit using those a long time ago. But you know, the thing is, if I was going to do this differently, you know, if I was going to, let's say like I had, for whatever reason, let's just say tomorrow I got sick and I had to get out of the Euro game or something like that, or I got in a car wreck and I had to get out of the Euro game or whatever. I would still keep them but I would just build massive cage. I would keep like an ornate, an Egyptian, and a Yemenensis, and I would just build these huge cages because, man, these things like just crush and cruise up and down all around all day. They're so active and they're so interesting and they're so intriguing to have around. They're smart. They're good at problem solving. They learn so quickly. So there'd be a lot of different ways I would do it if I wasn't trying to have a million of them, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the same way that we all think. I think we used to keep retics, and people would kind of give me shit. My biggest female was almost 17. She was 17-ish feet, and she was in an 8x3 by 18-inch tall cage. And we had some, like when she had babies, I had we took all the babies and put them in one big tub with a little bit of water and paper towels, let them all shed out, and then separated them. We put them in 6-quart tubs. 4 or 5 meals in, I took a bunch of them that just didn't seem like they were happy and put them in 15-quart boxes.
Yeah.
And they freaked. They stopped eating. They were biting constantly. They went from being very friendly and easy to handle to, as soon as you open it up, they shoot out at you. So you start to see these changes, and that's, like you said, it's about learning your animals and what you're doing. And it's great to go out and buy adults. It's how great is it to fast forward ahead in a project, but you don't earn your stripes. When you raise these animals and see what they do from year to year.
That's right. Yes.
What do you say? 5-6 years before they're ready to do anything?
It's variable. So you can get breed at 1.5, 2 years old, but you shouldn't breed them that young, but they certainly will try if you give them the option, right? I wait a minimum of 3 years before I breed anything, unless it's a male. At least with females, I wait 3 to 5 years. But it just depends.
So in other words, what the point is we rush everything. We do. Don't get to see all the cues and the little things that they do as they grow. And, I have a boa she's cruising right now. We bought her probably 2 or 3 years ago, and she's 6 now. She's still a little bit small. She was a little bit iffy on feeding when we first got her back, but I would think she would be a small breeding female right now, but we've never really pushed because why rush? I want to produce babies, but why
right? Because it'll happen if you just give it the time. It'll happen. Really, like, I feel like a huge percentage of what I do is just like pick up shit and get the fuck out of the way. You know what I mean? Like, just get out of the way.
Don't forget the pick up shit part.
Like they do it all. I just give them food and turds. That's like 90% of my life these days, between the reptiles and the cats. But you bring up a really good point. So, like, specifically pertaining to Uromastyx, there are 3 things I can think of that if you buy an animal from an adult, you're never going to know. It's going to take you years before you know. One is the fact that almost all Uromastyx will go through pretty strong seasonal ups and downs, right? And I'm talking they do it from year 1. So I've had people say, "Oh, I don't let them go through a winter cooling their first year." It's like, well, how? Mine all they have to. Like they don't. You can keep them in hot conditions for that whole first year, and regardless, when winter hits, they go down. I've got animals that disappear. I'm talking completely disappear from. Great examples. I have a Uromastyx flavifasciata, the white banded, that I hatched it in 2019.
Didn't you just post a picture of that?
I think, I did. Yeah.
Okay. I know what you're talking about.
Or maybe it was 2020. I'm sorry. I hatched it in 2020, and it grew like a weed until September. And at the beginning of September, it just shut off and it disappeared into a hide, and it did not come out September, October, November, December, January, February. And in March, this damn lizard came out, and it had grown through, but the 2 things it didn't do, it didn't eat and it didn't shit that whole time. The temps did and the animal is fine. It's put on 6 months of growth in 2 months. Or, well, I guess March, April, May, June, July. So it's put on a ton of size over the summer, right? But the point is, it was spent 6 months completely dead, basically. It just didn't do anything. If you said that, if a brand new keeper, they would get rid of the animal. They'd have no idea, right? I mean, and it could do that every single year. I've got animals that do that every year. And then I have some that are active all winter. They come out in the winter and they'll hand feed and they still breed and they do their thing, but they don't want to go down, you know, and that's okay, right? But that's one. The other thing is seasonal food preferences. When I worked with collared lizards, they had this same thing, but Uromastyx, like for example, in spring, summer, the warmer months, the Euros will eat dandelion like it's cocaine. Like they just woof it down and just, you know, like they'll do lines of dandelion flowers. I swear to God, they just love them. They go crazy.
Awesome.
But in fall, winter, and early spring, they won't eat dandelion. They don't want it. They want something else. They want escarole, or they want endive, or they want, you know, some other thing, or like collard. There's almost nothing that I have except for like romaine and green high value stuff like nasturtium flowers and dandelion flowers and stuff like that. That it doesn't matter what time of year or what condition that animal is in, they're going to eat that damn food. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So it's a short list, right? And each animal is a little bit different. So if you don't know these food preferences and you get an adult and it's like, I'm feeding it all this stuff my other Euros eat, but it's not eating them. It's like, well, you wouldn't know because you have no idea where it came from. You have no idea what its history is.
Yep.
Bowel movements, right? My Euros, I've got the hot spring and summer months, they're shitting every day, sometimes twice a day, right? But as soon as fall happens, as soon as in winter and early spring, they might not shit for a week or months, depending on how hard they're brumating, how lightly they're brumating, you know, I mean, and people will freak out at that, understandably, right? You know, I've got a couple of Moroccan Uromastyx that they only go to the bathroom a couple times a week, like 2-3 times a week. They shit, and granted, these are big lizards. My Egyptians are that way too. They're huge. And they'll shit every 2-3 days, maybe 4. And in the winter, they might not shit at all. Like they just don't. And there's nothing wrong with them. It's just, that's what they do. That all slows down, you know? These are things that if you don't put in the time, it can scare you. And that's one of the things, I feel like that's a big percentage of the questions I answer about Uromastyx in particular is, it's basically running interference and troubleshooting. People think something's wrong with their animal, but it's just winter. It's just fall or whatever it is. It's like, it's okay. And I understand why you're burned, but you know, you wouldn't, you gotta start with a baby, man. You gotta get a captive bred baby or a baby import and start with that and just learn about the animal as it grows, you know?
Yeah. The moral to that story is don't be in a hurry. Some of these animals are not turnkey. Listen, I used to be one of the biggest, I got to breed this, I got to breed that. If I sell this many babies, I'm going to make this much money. I don't think that way anymore. And now I start to look back at that and I think all the mistakes that I made. And now I look and say, okay, what can I do that's cool?
Oh yeah. God, dude.
What can I do that's cool that I can enjoy thoroughly? And now that we've talked, I'm going to change the Uromastyx setup. I've got different lights and stuff that I can give him. And I'm going to try that because maybe that's why he's not as active. I've got a UVB bulb on there, but maybe it's not bright enough. I have access to really awesome LED lights that I literally they're over top these cages behind me. I have to disconnect those when I do this recording. Otherwise, everything behind me is white. So awesome. They're strip lights that are 14 inches. They have 5 LEDs and they're 7K.
Yeah, sure.
So, you know, maybe that's all it is.
Yeah, they're bright as hell. That's awesome.
So, you know, there's so many cool things that I think we can do as keepers that we miss out on. And, you know, my mentor at one point, we were building some cages and he made the comment that the journey is greater than the destination.
Sure. Yeah.
I got to thinking about it and I thought, you know, that is a great way to look at it. You know? Yeah, it is. And you know, and the thing is, you know, Uromastyx in particular when they are at their best, they're one of the coolest. They're just such a badass animal to have around. They're impressive looking. They have fantastic color. They have they're very low maintenance. Other than your initial investment in the caging and setup in the animal,
they're very low investment. You know, you don't have to constantly buy them a ton of food.
Yeah.
You know, I spend half the year, I feed all my animals, they get wild food, you know.
Okay.
It's either flowers grown in my mom's backyard, because she's got a huge backyard, and I pick hollyhock. They'll eat hollyhock. Nothing but hollyhock blooms for 3 months, you know, or wild alfalfa plants or something like that. But there's so many ways you can make the care of them more interesting. Mm-hmm. And to your point before about don't be in a rush, even if you are in a rush with Uromastyx, it's not going to get you anywhere, because the reality of Uros is, for some reason, fresh import females who breed in their first year, or a high percentage of females who transition and change homes without going through a full cycle at the new home, usually the eggs don't survive. So, you know, when people sell, we got these baby Saharans in, and they hatched from a wild caught female who laid eggs when she was imported, and they hatched them, like, no, I call bullshit, because those eggs die. Those eggs always die. The baseline level of stress is too high for the female, and it always results in failed eggs, right? The same thing is true if a female transitions. So if you get let's say I bought an adult Molly right now, and I let her go through cooling, and I breed her in the spring, it's very, very high likelihood that her eggs won't make it. Now they might be fine, but it's a very high likelihood.
Yeah, the percentages increase on mortality.
Oh my God.
I've heard horror stories from people that, you know, have moved their animals just around in their house.
Yes, and they don't breed the same anymore.
Yeah, they lose a whole year of production. Totally. You know, or somebody moves, they lose that whole year. Females reabsorb. You know, it doesn't matter. People don't realize the amount of stress. And sorry, I keep looking over here to the side. My son has a Dumeral's boa, and she is a monster. Arguably the scariest.
Nice.
And she came out of the cage.
Oh, okay.
And she's got the world's worst feed response, and I firmly believe she's semi-autistic. I know I'm going to catch a lot of shit for saying that. Sorry, everybody.
Whatever, man. No, it's fine.
But she came out of the cage and missed the rat and face planted right into the carpet. So her whole mouth wide open, stuck to the floor. She come flying out of the cage. I'm like,
wow. It
took me half hour to finally get her out of the carpet. There's a blood stain in the carpet now. She ripped some of the carpet up. Like, but she's sitting with her face. She was in the back of the cage sleeping. And when I came in here and started doing this, she came right to the glass, and she's got her head about, here, I'll show you.
Let's see.
You can see her face right there.
Nice.
Her mouth is like all twisted up.
I could see it. Yeah.
she looks like, I don't know how that could be comfortable, but this is
no, it's so funny, man. I have, so walking around my Euro facility is just a trip and a half, because each one of them is so different. You know, like when I walk by my big male Egyptian pork chop, when I walk by his cage, his first thing is to just slam the wall. He wants to kill you. He's like, dude, get the hell out of here. This is where my bitches live. Like, get out of here. You know what I mean? Like, don't touch my women, you know? Like Conan the Barbarian. But then, you know, then I'll go go down another aisle, and I got a female Uromastyx yemenensis who is the flightiest thing in the world, except when you have flowers or this dry tortoise food. This it's by tortoisesupply.com. It's like their grassland tortoise food, and she will be fleeing in one direction, and I put my hand in where she can see what's in my hand, and she's just like, it takes and just flies right back, just as fast as she was fleeing from you. She comes flying towards you. You know, I have other ones who, females who the first thing they do is they run over. So in a lot of cages, what I have is a big, for like the arboreal stuff, that it's like ornates, yemenensis, ocelata, philbii, any of those species. I will have big chunks of manzanita, just laying around in the cage, wherever. And I put food across that, and they climb up on top of it, right?
Oh,
but
nice.
Some of them have learned, it works well, because if you look at like ornates in the wild, that's what they do. They climb these big trees, and they pick off the leaves and the flowers on the trees.
Okay.
Like chuckwallas, you know, they're very similar to chuckwallas in the US. And they've learned that if they come running over and they get up on that thing, then I'm going to hand feed them. So they'll come and just wait for
That's awesome.
me. You know, I've got males that will do push-ups every time I walk by. Dude, it's so funny, man. These things, I've got males who I can't clean their cage without taking them out and having a hand on them, because the second you put your hand in the cage, they're chasing it around like they're going to mate with your hand. And you're like, dude, get out of here. You know?
Yeah.
They are such fun reptiles to keep. And I love learning more about them all the time. And I mean, I really think that, you know, they're gaining in popularity. I think that more people are having success breeding them. So in time, we're going to get more of them around. I've never been more passionate about them. It's like every day that goes by, I love them a little bit more. And I you know, there's so much about Euros that if you give them enough time and you really invest a lot of time, there's so much nuance in keeping them happy, and the way you can interact with them and have fun with them. And, you know, I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with that. It's just, I love keeping them. It's just so much fun, man. It's just, I can't get enough.
There's a big part of all of us that have, for a certain animal, have a special place.
Yeah. Sure.
And some people on the outside just don't understand that.
Sure.
So when you say that, you make complete sense, because you have that passion where you go in and you know each one of your animals, you know, when you go there, what reaction you're going to get. And here's the thing that people don't realize is, you know, that reaction. And if you don't get that reaction, then you know something's not right. So something needs to be looked at.
Something's off. Yeah. Something's weird. Or something's changing, you know, or it's like, oh, it must be, oh, what he didn't, you know, Pork Chop didn't come charge the pen. What is it, October? Oh, it's winter, you know, like that's what it is. Or, you know, and the thing is, like, I think that really, like, doing just a few things could revolutionize anybody's experience of Uromastyx, right? So the first thing is, don't house them together. And I don't know why it's controversial. And look, I've said this before in many places. I have friends, mostly in Europe, who keep their animals in pairs, and they do fine. But without getting into too much detail, these are massive cages with massive different basking opportunities and hiding opportunities. And they are always ready to pull them out if there's any aggression at all. But the thing is, the reason I say the first thing that people could do to revolutionize their way of experiencing Uromastyx is to keep them alone, is because there's a lot of subtle behaviors between animals that go unnoticed, even by moderately experienced Uromastyx keepers. So there's a lot of individual suppression and bullying and things that you just don't know unless you've seen it 1,000 times, right?
Okay.
So I think keeping animals solo is one of the best ways to optimize their care. The second thing is, just cut way back on these, you know, these seeds and dry foods and bee pollen, right? Like, so one of my current gripes is that in the Uromastyx community as a whole, people overdo things like seeds, lentil, and other processed foods. And I think that that's leading to a lot of problems, but some of it's because of the food itself, that it's not necessarily nutritionally relevant in high amounts, or that it in the case of processed foods, it's the same thing as us eating McDonald's every day. It's just shit for them, right? But also, those dry foods, if you're doing too many of those seeds and those dry foods and lentils and stuff like that, and there are inadequacies in your care, that food is going to bring out the problems as a result of those inadequacies. Whereas if you stick to greens, for like 95%, 98% of your diet is just greens and wildflowers. If you stuck to that, you're going to get, and the 2% to 5% that you do differently, you only did it in the summer, it would change everything for the way people care for their animals. And I think this, in my opinion, the single thing that I do differently than anybody else that results in more consistent breeding for me is just that I keep them alone. I just keep them alone. I put them together. You know, I'll do all kinds of other weird little things like, you know, I'll take younger females and I'll put them in the cage with a male temporarily, just for a second, and I'll be there the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put two males next to each other with plexiglass in between so they can bicker with each other.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do all kinds of stuff like that so they can socialize and they can get Uromastyx to Uromastyx interaction.
Yeah. Yep, for sure.
And have an experience of other animals. But I don't ever force them to stay together all the time. I just, one of the key things that I do that's different, and you know, it's one of the first things I ask people. They say, I have a pair of Uromastyx and they've never bred, or I have a pair of Uromastyx and one of them's doing a thing. And I'm like, do you house them together? Is the first thing I ask. And they say, oh yeah, but I have, and they cuddle. And I'm like, no. We got a lot to talk. We got a lot to talk about, but
we cuddle.
Oh, it happens, man. I'm telling you. Oh, they share hides. They lay on top of each other in basking. It's like, dude, that's a bad thing. That's not good.
That's horrible.
That is anthropomorphization at its finest. And so just that one thing, and then the dry foods, because we have no, in terms of like raw data, we have so little data on, you know, like how much seeds they're getting in the wild, right? How, you know, because they eat them, obviously, right? There's a reason they eat seeds in captivity and they eat lentils, right? They must be eating something similar in the wild, but probably not that often. And, you know, probably totally different nutritional content. And, you know, I think that's one of my huge gripes lately has been just an overdoing, and bee pollen, right? Bee pollen is those little granules that they feed. Look, obviously bee pollen is a vital part of their diet. They eat flowers, you know, but the granules that you get, like each one of those granules is like 10 flowers worth of bee pollen, maybe more. So when you know, I've seen people give like a palm-sized pile of bee pollen, and they do it as treats because they love it. They go bananas for bee pollen and they come flying after it. They love it, but you gotta keep it real minimal, man, because people will feed a whole pile and it's like, dude, that's like 100 flowers. That's not, they would never eat that much at once. Yeah. You know, we just don't have any data on like how much they should get and how much is too much. And like, you know, what about the pesticide content in that bee pollen? What about the protein content in that bee pollen? Maybe there's too much zinc. I mean, we just have no idea. So it's, you gotta err on the safe side, you know, and you know, I just think doing just a few of those little things will do so much to revolutionize somebody's experience of Uromastyx as a pet, you know?
For sure.
And it's just, it's sticky data, you know, because this is stuff that like, or sticky methods, right? Because for 20 years, that's all we knew, right?
Yeah.
They'll eat seeds. Let's give them seeds, right?
I've seen people's cages where all the substrate is seeds. And
right. And
why?
And there was a time when you know, I know the guy who started that trend, right? It's Douglas Dix, and Doug knew that guy's great. He paved the way for a lot of what I do, right? It's guys like him and Lindsay Pike and Noah Alt and Randy Gray and, you know, some of these other guys, Bert Langerwerf in Europe, you know, I mean, he was here, I know, but I mean, and other guys in Europe. Yeah. These guys paved the way, but that doesn't mean that the way they did it, that doesn't mean it's the only way to do it, right? Yeah. And none of those guys had the length of time and experience. Well, Bert did, but none of these guys otherwise had the length of time and number of animals and diversity to say, all right, if I'm going to do it a couple of different ways and see what happens. Do I get better results when I do it like this? They were doing what was right for them at the time.
Yeah.
But we just, you know, over time, things change, things improve, and that's fine. Like the way I'm doing things right now, I'm sure there are going to be things that I'm doing totally differently in 20 years. Right.
Well, so let's not forget that what you're doing in Colorado is different than what I would do here in Florida.
Totally.
Which is different than what your buddy would do in New York, which is different than the guy in California or Texas.
Exactly right. Yes.
I think that it's really, really tough for people to wrap their head around when somebody, like you sell somebody an animal and they live in Maine and they call you a year later and say, oh my God, it's doing this and I can't figure out why. What did you sell me? And it's like, well, stop. I'm in Colorado.
Slow it down.
I'm in Colorado. You're in Maine. There's a different elevation. There's different temperatures. Things are different, and I think people miss that and get upset too quick instead of stopping to think that, wait a second, I'm sitting in my reptile room right now and I'm sweating because it's over 80 degrees in here. If I walk out of this room, it's 74 degrees
I get it.
in my house. That's just the way that it is. So But the humidity here is through the roof. So for me to put an animal like that in a sliding glass cage, like you said,
be too much. Yeah,
it's too much. It's just stuffy.
Yeah, so totally.
I try, like with all these snakes, all the sliding glass doors are tight, but not tight. When I had the guys cut the glass, I told them I wanted a really
not airtight.
Yeah, I want a really slight difference in top and bottom. So this way, when I put the glass in, it's kind of angled inward. So there's air that goes through. The cages are vented on the sides. Some of them have more venting in the top.
Yeah.
But again, we're all different. In New York, I wouldn't have vented these cages at all.
Totally. Right.
Because the temperatures are different,
Right. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I have the luxury of being in a state that gets cold as shit in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So granted, that does my power bill in the winter. It also allows me to take advantage of some of that natural resource. And I let the temperature drop through the whole facility. Right. Mm-hmm. Everybody experiences the same cool down and the same come up. Right. Mm-hmm. Now there's some variation there in terms of individual caging and stuff like that. But for the most part, the seasonal shift is about the same. Yeah. And, I've got a good friend in Florida, this guy, Thomas Marinos. He's been breeding Moroccans longer than I have. But he's done some great work this year. He got some ocelota and some Ornata, and he's in Florida. So his hey kitty, nice. His cool down considerations are going to be very different from mine, which are also going to be very different from my friend Mike Rodriguez in California. Right, his cooling is going to be very different because California is perhaps more amicable to Euros. So he would almost have to do nothing, or then my friend Nick in Philadelphia, he bred Molly and Philby and Ocelota this year. He's kicking ass, probably going to do a lot more next year and in the next couple of years. And his considerations for cooling are going to be completely different as well. Right. So, or Pennsylvania rather. So, and it doesn't, you don't have to get into the nitty gritty all the time, because some of these variations in regional temperature, the animals will take, I was just typing on my, I'm writing in, a breeding guide right now, so, but that is either going to go into the book or whatever. And one of the things I mentioned, we talk about like incubation, right? So we all talk about incubation as something that's like a science, like an exact in some ways. I think it's more of an art, right? So I'm an artist by trade as well. Like I used to do concept art, like 2D concept art and stuff, and now I draw reptiles sometimes. But like I'm mentioning in this guide that even though too dry and too wet both have their downsides and their problems and can cause failure, that Goldilocks zone where things are good is a pretty wide range. There's a pretty wide range of conditions under which Euro eggs will hatch, and they'll be fine. I've bred and hatched stuff on perlite, vermiculite, Rapace hatch, sim containers, cocoa fiber. I mean, and they've all hatched. Right? It doesn't matter, right? But as long as the base conditions are met, it'll work. And that's also true. It's not just of incubation. That's true of care. Okay, so maybe in Florida, instead of going down from September until March, they go down from November to February. Okay, so what? It's okay.
That's their choice. Yeah,
that's their call. They are responding to the environment, and we don't have to standardize every little thing of it. I mean, look at Bert Langerwerf, right? I cite him all the time because that dude is the GOAT. I mean, he's the greatest ever, and that guy. He bred Uromastyx, Moroccan Uromastyx, outside in Alabama. Like, people tell me all the time, oh, I probably couldn't keep my Euro outdoors, and in Florida. I'm like, no, you probably could. Like there's probably a way to do it. And who's probably going to figure that out next is probably Ron St. Pierre. Because
oh yeah, he is.
Whenever they get some Euros, eventually, I know that
he told me that's his plan right now.
They're going to get some Euros, and whenever they do, they're going to figure it out. It's like, yeah, he's totally going to do it. And the thing is, if Moroccans can survive in Alabama, dude, have you seen those pictures of Bert's farm when it was just covered in snow?
No.
I mean, bro, look, yeah. Dude, it's just the way it is, right? Like, there's such a wide range, and I think listening to the animals and like really paying attention to them and being willing to make mistakes, and not mistakes that cost the life of the animal, because that sucks, right?
Yeah.
But to like toy with things and don't treat them like this delicate little flower that the second something goes wrong, they're going to die. Dude, these things, Uromastyx I say they're bulletproof. That's not really the case. They're tanks. I mean, even the little tiny ones, the Princeps, they're angry little monster tanks,
That's awesome.
Dude. They're not going to fuck around. They will tell you everything you need to know. And you just have to be willing to like, just take a step back, listen to them. You don't have to lay it all out for them, Mm-hmm. And I've done it too. When I kept leopard geckos, I kept them in racks, and I used the cheapest caging and everything, and that's okay too. There's a place for that in our industry. But
sure there is.
It's like not all animals are going to respond very well to that kind of lifestyle. And Euros, I think they're such a beautiful meeting of the worlds, right? So it's not as simple as a leopard gecko, but it's not as complicated as like a panther chameleon or a basilisk lizard, or like a calotes, or what are those, helmeted iguanas? I don't remember their Latin, but they're not helmeted iguanas, right? They're not something that's going to be so freaking challenging. They're right in the middle. They're something interesting for long-term keepers and new hobbyists alike. They're like the perfect middle ground in so many ways, So I don't know.
All right. Well, you know what? I think we can wrap this up, and I think we definitely need to do this again. But what I would really like to do is
absolutely, dude. I could keep going, man. I got a problem.
what I'd really like to do is get Ron and Eddie on, and that would be so much fun.
Yeah, heck yeah, man. I mean, those guys are
so much fun.
Those guys talk circles around me, but I'll talk all day long.
Oh yeah, and listen, I love this. This is I have huge anxiety. So when I started doing this year, that was like my big, I'm going to get through this and I'm going to do it. And now I'm having fun with it. And it's awesome.
That's great, man.
Meeting great people and getting to talk about animals that, like Uromastyx is something that we have won, but it's something that has never really been on our radar. So, now more than ever, like I said, Jeannie and Jeremy post pictures of theirs, and I'm so jealous because they're beautiful. And it's like, man, I really, really want some of those. So,
dude, they're doing a great job too, man. They got all those Euros came from me, and I know that I've been watching them. They're doing the right things, and it's only a matter of time before they're producing them too. So it's really good. It's good to see. Yeah, man. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, thank you for coming on.
Of course. Yeah. Anytime.
I will be posting all of your information in the description. I'm going to maybe take a day or so extra to get this video out, because I'm going to go through and fix all these little pauses. And then people will be
okay. Sure, sounds good.
So it'll probably be like Saturday.
Yeah,
I'll probably do that all Friday night.
Okay, yeah.
But I will let you know.
Awesome, man.
It was great talking with you.
You too, man.
Hold on one second. Let me stop the recording. Everybody, thank you.